but I never wanted to be a politician. So I studied dentistry at the University of Glasgow.
Did you actually practice as a dentist?
Yeah, I did. One of the reasons why I chose to do dentistry was to keep away from politics. I could always get the sense that my father wanted me to be a politician. I never wanted to be a politician.
Anas Sarwar is a Scottish Labour and Cooperative politician.
He has served as leader of the Scottish Labour Party since 2021,
which won the 2024 UK general election with a landslide victory.
Things had to be really bad for the Scottish Labour Party if they allowed someone from an ethnic minority background to lead it and take it forward. And it was survival mode that time. The question was whether the Scottish Labour Party would survive.
Welcome to the BricksToRiches podcast. Today we have a very special guest, the leader of the Labour Party in Scotland. Anas, welcome to the podcast.
My pleasure, good to chat to you.
First of all, tell me this. You used to be a dentist. You graduated in dentistry.
I was actually looking at it, Nabil. You've got great teeth, honestly.
Thank you.
First thing a dentist notices is good teeth.
Thank you. I had veneers done for my brother-in-law in London.
Is that right?
Yeah, composite.
So your brother was a dentist?
Yeah, he's a dentist.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So is my niece.
Fantastic.
So I thought I have to get veneers when I start podcasting. You have to look good for the camera.
You're doing that well. You're nailing it. You're nailing it.
Composite veneers. So if I don't like them, I can take them off. So tell me your journey. How come someone educated in dentistry, in the medical world, let's say, and went into politics? That's a rare thing. It doesn't normally happen. Why did you make such a transition?
I think a couple of things. One is politics has always been kind of in my blood. I've always cared about politics. I've always been really passionate about politics. I joined
It was that because of your father? Because obviously I used to visit your father when he was the governor of Punjab. We used to go there and have lunch with him. Me and my brother did.
Of course, he's very close to you and your brother.
Yeah,
of course.
you're a family friend. So he's very kind. We used to meet your mother and your father there. They used to feed us lots of curries, and so we had some great experiences there. But was that because of your father being in politics in Pakistan?
So I think where I got a political interest. Obviously, I had a very political household. So I remember when I was growing up, my dad was getting elected as Britain's first Muslim MP. His English wasn't great, spoke quite broken English, so I used to help him with writing his speeches, etc. And so I got a bit of political interest from that. Joined the Labour Party when I was 15 years old, which obviously got a passion and energy from. But actually I never got my politics from my dad in a weird kind of way. Actually I got my politics from my mother. My mum was always the more political one in the family.
Yes.
Never stood for election, never wanted to be a politician, never been an elected member, but actually is definitely the best politician in our family. So I got my politics from her.
Wonderful lady, your mother.
Oh, an incredible woman. Yeah. And she's born in Pakistan, raised in Scotland. She was raised in the northeast of Scotland in a village called Lossiemouth.
Oh, right.
And then moved back to Pakistan with my father around 15 years ago. Didn't really settle at first, to be honest, but embraced her charity projects, and that's what really drives her. That's her passion, doing good things for people that are less fortunate, which is fantastic.
She's a philanthropist. My mum's actually done some charity work with her in Pakistan.
Yeah, so mum does loads of women's empowerment stuff, supporting young people into education, particularly young girls, and health projects around female health. But sorry, you were mentioning about politics.
Yeah, so dentistry. So did you actually practice as a dentist?
Yeah, I did. So I studied dentistry at the University of Glasgow. And actually one of the reasons why I chose to do dentistry was to keep away from politics, because I could always get the sense that my father wanted me to be a politician. I never wanted to be a politician. I cared about politics. I wanted to be campaigning on issues I cared about, but I never wanted to be a politician. And that's one of the reasons why I went and studied dentistry, where I got a passion for public service. I've always believed in public service. And actually through that passion and belief in public service, the stars aligned in terms of politics and elected politics. And I feel as if what I'm doing now is just an extension of that same public service.
Nice. Maybe you can be the dentist for all the politicians in the Labour Party.
I have done many a dental examination for many a politician across all political parties. I often get called for dental advice. Right. I've done it so far for the Deputy Prime Minister, not yet for the Prime Minister.
Angela Rayner.
I have, just last week she was in Glasgow and had an issue with her tooth, and so I hope I gave her some good advice.
Good. Now, you've done remarkably well, Anas. You are the leader of the Labour Party in Scotland, the first South Asian to have this wonderful post. How did you get there, and what challenges did you face being an ethnic minority group? Because that's wonderful to be the leader of the Labour Party in Scotland, and hopefully one day I pray that you become the First Minister of Scotland.
Thank you, Nabil. I always say, particularly privately with friends, that things had to be really bad for the Scottish Labour Party if they allowed someone from an ethnic minority background to lead it and take it forward. And look, I stood for election first time 2010. representing the UK Parliament for my Glasgow constituency. I was then in the Scottish Parliament in 2016. I actually stood for the leadership first time in 2017 and wasn't successful, and stood for leadership again in 2021 when we were around, we just had a European election where we only got 8% of the vote in Scotland. We were only about 14% in the opinion polls, and I really did feel as if I had to step up and play my part at that point. And it was survival mode that time. The question was whether the Scottish Labour Party would survive, never mind whether it could win an election, or never mind whether it could elect a Labour Prime Minister again or a Labour First Minister again. And so I put myself forward. I campaigned really hard, of course, and I'm pleased that people put their faith and support in me, and I hope they can see that I brought a different kind of energy, a different kind of character to the job. I'm being myself. I'm proud to be myself. I'm being myself. I love talking to people. I love learning from people, and I hope that this great country that made my family feel welcome and my family feel home, I would love to lead this country as First Minister, and that's what I'm going to work really hard to do over the next 14, 15 months.
So what changes will you bring in? Obviously people expect cost saving, living standards to improve. What's your goal? If you became the First Minister of Scotland, what would you bring for the people of Scotland?
So I think the number one thing has to be how we bring our NHS into the modern times, because right now we've got a really terrible NHS crisis. 1 in 6 of Scots are on an NHS waiting list. There are countless number of people who are having to take out mortgages or take loans from family and friends in order to pay for private treatment because they aren't accessing that treatment in the NHS. So that's the first thing. We've got to clear the NHS backlogs. We've got to make sure the NHS is there when you or a loved one need it, and we've got to make sure the NHS is fit for the future. That's the number one social policy outcome. And as someone that's been a dentist in the NHS, I know how important it is.
So would you reduce the wait time then? Is that where you go?
So the number one priority would be to reduce waiting times. And I think there's ways of doing that around increasing capacity, what you do around workforce planning, what you do to create more capacity within the NHS, and then fundamentally reform it and make it fit for the future. We are bureaucracy, mid-manager heavy in Scotland. We don't really do digital innovation and technology in terms of fast diagnosis, fast treatment innovation. We want to do that, as well as planning the longer term in terms of making sure the NHS is fit for the future. But that's on the social policy side. On an economic policy side, and actually where you're from in the part of the UK is actually a really good advert for us, Nabil, because you have a mayor in Andy Burnham who is a deal maker. He gets things done. He uses his convening power, he gets business around the table, he breaks down barriers, he attracts inward investment, and that means more projects, more investment, it means higher levels of growth, and it means better economic outcomes for people that live in Greater Manchester. Who is making the deals for Scotland? Who's getting things done, who's partnering with businesses, who's attracting investment, who's making the argument, who's breaking down the barriers? That's the role I want to play. I want to be a deal maker that gets things done for Scotland.
I hope so, because the issue I see is that a lot of politicians overpromise, underdeliver. I know you personally, so I know when you promise something you'll deliver. And in England, for example, every 45 minutes, because obviously I'm in property and I deal with high value transactions, in England every 45 minutes a millionaire is leaving. So because they don't want to, that disappointed by Starmer, the taxes that the public are paying. So they want to leave, they feel safer abroad. How will you make sure people stay in Scotland and they don't leave for, let's say, Dubai or Monaco? Because people want to feel safer, they want to pay less tax. What will you incentivize the people of Scotland with? So
I think we have two fundamental challenges. One is we don't have enough right now already, and we aren't attracting more to come. And that is, how do we create more wealth and opportunity within the country, as well as attract investment into the country as well. And the bottom line is Scotland's not got the ability to do it with the money we have ourselves. We have to have private sector investment. We have to have foreign direct investment into Scotland if we are going to see our economy grow. And we've got levers in Scotland. So again, I'll use the Manchester example. Manchester has fewer levers than Scotland does. It has fewer powers than Scotland does. It has less resources than Scotland does, but it taps into what it does have to maximum effect. We're not doing that the same way in Scotland. We've got levers on income tax in Scotland, and right now income tax is being used as a substitute for economic growth and actually pushing talent away. How do we have a fair tax system that attracts talent and investment in the country? Rates is fully devolved in Scotland. Our rate system right now is not fit for purpose. Right now it's rigged against the high streets, our hospitality sector, our retail sector, and is more in favour of the online giants. How do we reform our rate system to attract investment into cities? Planning is wholly devolved in Scotland. Our planning system is a disaster in Scotland. The average time it takes for a planning application in Manchester is 16 to 18 weeks.
No, but it's longer. I'm on the front line.
In my home city of Glasgow, it's 58 weeks.
Wow.
Is the average wait for a planning application. Now, you'll probably say there's examples of where it's over 18 weeks, but it's not nowhere near 58 weeks. And that means if you're a business person trying to make a decision on an investment, if the choice is to go to, for example, Greater Manchester, where you know what a consistent answer will be and you have a relative idea of what the time frame will be, or to, for example, make that investment in Glasgow and wait 58 weeks and have an inconsistent answer, where are you going to put your money? It's not going to be Glasgow. So rates is another example. We've got development agencies in Scotland that aren't using its full weight. They don't feel connected. So if you're a business person that wants to invest in Scotland, you're handed from one organisation to another organisation to another, rather than getting a proper concierge support of how we attract your investment into the country. And we don't do regional economic development either, and that's around transport, it's around infrastructure, all of that completely missing from Scotland. That's all the levers we can pull if we have a government that's focused on economic policy and focused on economic growth.
So how do you, Anas, attract foreign investment? Let's say investment from England. I'm buying a lot of property in Scotland because there's a lot of opportunity here. How do you get investment from overseas? Like, for example, if you look at Dubai, all of the world's putting money into there. If you look at Mayfair and London, a lot of international money comes there from India, China, etc. How do you attract investors? You have to offer them something special for them to come here. What would you offer them?
So a few different things. One is, where are the bespoke projects that we are pitching for investment for? So as Scotland PLC, what are we saying are the projects we've identified, the investments we want to make, and the infrastructure we need that we can go out and pitch for that money to come? We haven't even done that yet. So how do we say, for example, to you as a business person, we have a project and ambition to build X number of homes, and we've identified the land where that homes, where those homes can be built. We've set a baseline of what those kind of homes need to look like and what the infrastructure is needed around those homes, as well as the, for example, the schools or the health centres. And then we say, here's the land, here's the project, here's the kind of houses we want, here's the infrastructure we need, come and make that investment, and we will work to break down the barriers in terms of consenting, in terms of planning, in terms of other regulation to attract that investment. We're not doing that right now, we've got to start doing that. Similar to that, what are the big projects? For example, we've got the clean energy revolution. We've got so much capacity here around offshore wind, onshore wind, solar, tidal, hydrogen. I think micronuclear should be an option for us here as well. How do we identify those projects? How do we identify where those projects will go? How do we make sure we're breaking down the barriers around the grid? How we're breaking down the barriers around planning, and saying a government will partner with you to get these things done and to break down the barriers. That'll be another attraction for you to invest in the country. And third, we should use the soft power of Scotland. The number of people that have a connection to Scotland, either through family heritage or through love of country or love of brand, how do we tap into that soft power of Scotland to make you want to come here, invest here, and spend your money here? Again, we don't do that anywhere near enough.
Maybe offer people grants, offer government contribution to come and invest in.
We should offer government grants, we should offer government loans, we should offer rates relief, we should offer all sorts of these things in order to attract investment, 100% absolutely.
Because if you go overseas and say to someone, oh, do you want to go to Scotland? If I go to India, for example, or Dubai, people refer to Scotland as, oh, I want to send my kid to St Andrews to study, so students. It attracts students, city of culture. People look into Edinburgh. So people don't really look at Scotland to invest. If I go to speak to some international person, I say, let's buy a property in the United Kingdom, they'll say, oh, let's buy a Mayfair, buy London. They don't really think of Scotland's not top of the...
But the interesting thing from that, Nabil, is you'll notice is the affinity exists for Scotland, and the positive attitude to brand Scotland exists, where people think it's a good tourism opportunity,
city of culture,
and a good culture opportunity. How do we match our culture objectives and our brand with investment opportunity? And that for us is the perfect sweet spot that I don't think we've done enough work on yet.
Well, I hope you do it. But you're the man to take it forward. What about...
I'll be coming to you for lots of investments if we're successful on the wheel.
Of course. I'm already buying a lot of properties in Glasgow, so hopefully I'll do more. And you
Yes,
can give
please.
me nice grants.
That'd be good.
And you can catalyse the planning process. Hopefully I won't have to wait 58 weeks.
But generally on the planning process, the reason why that's really important, it's not about, you know, creating advantage for individual business people. It's actually about how you attract investment and how you do proper city development and regional development. And we have a culture problem right now in Scotland where it feels like we have a culture of hunting for a reason to say no rather than looking for a reason to say yes. And we've got to fundamentally shift that culture. Because if we don't, the money's going to go somewhere else, the people are going to go somewhere else, the investment's going to go somewhere else, the opportunity is going to go somewhere else. I want that opportunity here. And again, I'll give you two practical examples. We are world renowned for our shipbuilding industry. But right now, because of difficulties governments had around making ferries, is we are giving Scottish government contracts to shipbuilding companies in other countries around the world when we have got world-leading shipbuilding here. That's a broken rig system. That's the jobs being offshore, the opportunity going somewhere else. That building work should be done here. Take our renewables infrastructure. That's going to be Scotland's going to lead the way for the entire UK around the clean energy revolution. But right now, the wind turbines aren't built here, the components aren't built here, the supply chains aren't here. So, okay, we might get the turbine, but we don't get the jobs in terms of the process of creating that. And again, those jobs go elsewhere. How do we get the supply chains here, the port infrastructure here, the investments here, to have the large-scale jobs here that allows us to be an advert to the world, but also attract investment from other parts of the world into Scotland as well. We've got to break the way we think about these things. And again, it's an entrepreneurial way. You know, I come from, I didn't work in business myself, I worked in the NHS as a dentist, but I come from an entrepreneurial family.
Yes.
And I often think with politics, there's a lack of entrepreneurialism and business thinking when it comes to how you deliver effective government. And so many things that we accept in the public sector would never be accepted in the private sector. We should hold ourselves to a high standard as well, respecting people's money, not wasting the public's money, and making sure every single penny is spent well to maximise the outcomes. That's what we've got to do.
As an entrepreneur, an investor wants efficiency, like you said, the planning, any investment, whether it's NHS or any sector, you want efficiency and you want a good return on your investment. If you can offer those, I'm sure you'll get the money in.
And so one is that. One is create the investment opportunity, make sure it's a good return, because businesses have to make profit, and we should be relaxed about businesses making profit as long as it's helping to grow our economy.
That's what makes the world go round.
And have good outcomes for their workforce.
Yes.
But also, how do you make us an attractive advert in terms of what we get back as a nation? Yes. So that's where you mentioned grants, that's where you mentioned, for example, co-investment in infrastructure. And again, I'll give you a practical example. Right now we're about to build what's called the ScotWind project, the largest offshore wind farm anywhere, perhaps anywhere in the world, certainly anywhere in the UK. There are state-owned companies from Norway, from France, and other companies that are investing in that infrastructure, meaning those countries are going to make money, and the profits they make are going to help support delivering quality services in those countries.
Yes.
But we don't get a stake because we haven't done the same infrastructure work. That's the kind of example of how we can do things differently.
But you're creating employment. People of Scotland will get jobs, won't they?
So create employment. So let's create the employment, but let's also create a mechanism where some of the fruits of that development and the profits of that development actually go back into creating more investment and more opportunities in Scotland as well.
I hope so. And what do you think of Donald Trump? Donald Trump recently got inaugurated, and he loves having golf courses.
He's got a Scottish granny.
Yeah, he's got a Scottish granny.
He's got a Scottish granny from the Western Isles.
Oh, right. I didn't know that. Something you learn every day. But yeah, with Donald Trump, he loves golf courses.
Or was it a Scottish mother, I think? Actually, his mother was Scottish. His mother was Scottish.
Yeah. But he loves golf courses in Scotland. If Donald Trump wants to invest here and bring his brand here, that'll be great for Scotland. Donald Trump's a huge brand.
So he actually already has two key investments in Scotland. One is obviously Turnberry, which is a golf course, and he's just in the process of opening another development in Aberdeenshire.
Yes.
Now, the point I'd make about Donald Trump is it's no secret that him and I don't have the same politics. We come from a different political spectrum, we come from a different political background. But there are two things, one about the country, one about the personality. On the country, the US is a key strategic ally of Scotland and the UK.
Oh, yes.
It's an ally in terms of economic prosperity,
Yes.
but it's also an ally in terms of national security.
Yes.
And that's why it's important that we have a positive relationship with
Yes.
the US. Secondly, whenever there is political disagreement, the business to business and the person to person relationships become even more important. And that's why we've got to strengthen those ties, both in terms of cultural ties and business ties directly between Scotland, UK and the US. And for that reason, I'll be in the US later this year directly to help strengthen those business and cultural ties because they're important. But on Donald Trump himself, I think too often we like to focus too much on the personalities, less
Yes.
on the issues. And how do we tap into the bits we agree with him on
Yes.
around investment, pro-growth, etc., in order to maximise the opportunities for Scotland rather than purely fixating on the areas we disagree. And on getting things done, on getting deals done, on doing what's right for Scotland, I will work with anybody if it's the
Yes.
right thing to do for Scotland. And why can't we tap into the fact that he has an affinity to Scotland through his mother?
Yeah.
He talks often about his mother and the Western Isles. He talks often about his investments in Scotland. So how do we tap into the soft power, positive bits to maximise opportunities for Scotland, whilst, of course, you can continue to have broader political disagreements?
And also with Donald Trump, he's a seasoned businessman, he's a seasoned entrepreneur, so he could bring in a lot of that entrepreneurship to Scotland.
But the other thing, Nabil, as a businessman yourself,
Yes.
what you will know, and you've done this very well,
Yes.
and you and Anilba have done this
Yes.
really, really well, is you recognise that actually in business, of course the deal matters, of course
Yes.
the right project matters, but actually also relationships really
Yes,
matter.
of course.
And the strength of relationships, the strength of networking, the strength of getting things done through those relationships and networking in a positive way, I
Yes.
don't mean that in a negative way,
Yeah.
is fundamentally important to your business and fundamentally important in terms of growing your business. And relationships matter to Donald Trump.
Yes.
And so, and lots of business people across the country, and how we strengthen those relationships, I think is really important, focusing on the areas we agree, and of course keeping the areas
Yes.
we still disagree, because that's politics, right? So
Yes.
you can have fundamental disagreements. There's lots of governments
Yes.
around the world that do not come from a same left of centre perspective as a Labour Party,
Yes.
but we still have a positive relationship with them because of either security ties or trade ties. That relationship with the US is fundamentally important, and it's one we've got to strengthen.
So to summarise that, Anas, Donald Trump coming in power, will that help Scotland or not? So that's my question to
Well,
you.
I think ultimately time will tell.
Yeah, but right now, from what you've
because
seen,
we have there's a nervousness around tariffs, as you know.
Yes.
You know, the whisky industry in particular, which is a huge employer and a huge exporter from Scotland, has a huge market in the US, and they have a nervousness around tariffs.
Yes.
Any tariffs would, of course, negatively impact their business, negatively impact the economy of Scotland.
Yeah.
So having positive dialogue around minimising the risk of tariffs is going to be important. That's just one industry, the salmon industry being another. So I think time will tell on some of it, but I think the potential exists to build a strong relationship and to maximise cultural and business ties if we are willing to work on the areas we agree.
Nice. And also, like, you come from a family background of politics. Your father's a politician. He's in Pakistan when Imran Khan was in power. Your father used to be very close with him. Sadly, he's just given a 14-year jail sentence. And obviously he's been politically muted, so he can't stand an election. I know we're in Scotland, not Pakistan, but if you were the leader of the First Minister of Scotland, how would you help Imran Khan? Would you try and help? Like Donald Trump said, I'm going to try and help my friend Imran Khan get out of jail. Would you try and help Imran Khan get out?
So a couple of things. One is, two Sarwars never do politics in the same continent. So so that's why, you know, my father's done politics in a different continent while I've been doing politics here. He never interfered with my politics. I never interfered with his. Of course, he has always been supportive. I've always been supportive of him, but I've never been associated with any political party in Pakistan. I've never been involved with any political party in Pakistan, and that would always be the approach I take. In saying that, of course, human rights matter to me.
Yes.
Of course, the rule of law matters to me. And of course, the supporting the principle of democracy matters to me.
And also the overseas Pakistanis in Scotland and the whole of England and the world, they are making a stand for Imran Khan to come out because of the human rights issue. Forget that. Say if Imran Khan said, I want to come out of jail and move to Scotland. I want to live in Edinburgh because I can't. So how would you help him? What would you do?
So if he were to be
Yeah.
allowed to leave and he wanted to set home in the UK, I'm sure the UK would make him very welcome. If you remember when Nawaz Sharif
Yes.
was under house arrest
Yes,
and he was allowed to leave,
Yes.
he was allowed to move to the UK and he lived in
Park Lane, Mayfair.
lived in London.
Yeah.
So there is precedent for that.
Yes.
But I'm not going to get involved in the day-to-day politics of Pakistan. What I will say though is, you're right, there's lots of Scottish Pakistanis who care deeply about what's happening in Pakistan, and the right to care deeply about what's happening in Pakistan. What I would say to them though is, alongside caring about what happens in Pakistan, care about what happens in politics here in Scotland and the UK too. Because for all my parents' generation, my grandparents' generation, many of my own generation will have an affinity to Pakistan, have a love for Pakistan.
Yes.
Fundamentally, Scotland's my home, Scotland's my children's home, this is my identity, and their children and their grandchildren will be the exact same. They're not going to go to Pakistan. Scotland's their home, the UK's their home. They've got to make sure that this country's a success, and they've got to make sure they're investing in this country to be a success. And they're young people to take a full stake in what happens in this country. So yes, keep an interest and passion for what happens in the country of their origin, but also focus on the politics of here, because it really matters.
I agree with that. And also did Labour, like I'm from England, we have an office in Mayfair, Manchester, and at the moment, a lot of people don't have the confidence in Labour. I tell Angela Rayner this, who's a mutual friend. So Labour needs to promise what they said in the election and also help businesses grow. For example, school fees are being taxed now in England. You have to pay VAT on them. Some parents can't afford that. They have to take their kids out of private school.
So I think the challenge, I think in fairness to the UK Labour government, the challenge they've had as an incoming government has been unprecedented, because what's happened over time is a government that's coming across the UK has sometimes come when the economy is flatlining.
Yes.
They've sometimes come in when the public sector is decimated in terms of our public services. And they've sometimes come in when the public finances are shot to bits.
Yes.
What's happened with the this Labour government when it was elected in July 2024 is when they came in, they were coming into all three at the exact same time. And that meant, of course, that difficult decisions did have to be made. So the commitment that was made was, yes, to prioritise economic growth, because ultimately you only get to deliver social change if it's backed up with a strong growing economy. But they also committed not to return to the era of austerity and to invest in our public services. And so they've had to make difficult choices in the early days to stabilise the public finances, to make sure there's a quick injection into our public services, for example, our NHS, where there's a crisis right across the UK in terms of NHS services. They've had to make that decision. What they now have to do, though, is make sure they're instilling confidence in businesses and the economy, so we can get the economic growth that we all need to see. And that's where, on the supply side, on the regulatory side, on the legislative side, they have got to make sure that they're making the fundamental changes that need to be made. And they've hinted at some of that already around, for example, planning, which is obviously not relevant to us in Scotland. Planning's already devolved, but around planning, around regulation, around attracting investment. They have to move really quickly on that to try and get confidence back in the economy, because there's not been much confidence in the economy for years now. That long predates the election of a Labour government, and attract investment here. And I think they understand that. I think the early part has been obviously a challenge, given the inheritance that they had.
And in relation to Scotland, after Brexit, but a lot of people expect, some people want Scotland to be independent. Obviously, what's your views on that? Do you think Scotland could ever achieve that?
So I think the big lesson from Brexit is huge constitutional change does not come without consequence. And the reality is, for
England's still paying the price for Brexit.
Absolutely, I think the whole UK is still paying the price, to be honest with you. And they're paying a price because they left their largest trading partner, and they tried to unwind decades of intertwining and regulation. Scotland's largest trading partner is the rest of the UK. We trade more with the rest of the UK than we do with the whole of the rest of the world combined. So we have a UK single market, which is a really important relationship for us. And we have hundreds of years of intertwining. To unwind that would be a consequence, actually, that amplifies Brexit rather than mitigates Brexit. So I respect those that support independence. That's their view. I don't support independence. I don't support a referendum. But I'm not going to turn my back on those people, because fundamentally, taking away from the politicians, fundamentally many people that support independence do it because they think that's the best route, or at times felt like the only route to get better outcomes for people in Scotland. And what my job is to demonstrate over the next 15 months, and then touch wood if we're successful in the election, demonstrate over the following 5 years that we can actually achieve things and get things done and improve outcomes for people in Scotland while staying part of the United Kingdom. And through that, hopefully persuade people that a different future is possible rather than going down the route of independence. And I'll work with anyone. Genuinely, I'll work with anyone. I don't care if people voted for independence in the past. I actually don't even care if they voted for Brexit in the past. If they've got a good idea, if they want to improve outcomes for people in this country and they want to work together, I will work with anyone in the interest of Scotland.
Good, I like that open-mindedness. You put Scotland first, so the economy grows.
We have to. What I often say to people is, look, we might ultimately, a lot of people in Scotland disagree on the final destination for Scotland. So there's a big chunk of people that want us to be independent, for example. There's many who want us to remain part of the UK, and there's some that support a hybrid of the two. So we might disagree on the final destination. What we can all agree is what's happening right now is not working. This current Scottish government is not working. So let's all work together to improve our nation, and then through that improving nation, if people choose to have a different view on a different constitutional future, that's fine. But in the here and now, let's get things done and deliver for Scotland.
Okay, and what do you think of far right? What do you think of Farage? What's your views on that?
Well, it's really interesting because I get asked a lot about Nigel Farage. I get asked a lot about the
Elon Musk
Party.
at the inauguration when they did that Nazi.
Yeah, so I get asked a lot about Farage, Musk, Reform, and other characters. And my view on all of these things is, let's not talk about the personalities, let's not talk about the people, because that's what they want.
Yes.
Let's instead talk about what drives ordinary people to politicians like Elon Musk or parties like Reform. What's the issues? I don't think it's because they ultimately agree with the broader politics of these individuals. I think what drives them there is they don't see an improvement in their lives from what's happening right now and what's been happening for decades. They think government doesn't work for them. They think the economy doesn't work for them. They think public services don't work for them. They don't believe politicians, and therefore they are turning to these divisive parties as a reaction because they think nothing can get better anyway. And the way we win those people back is we confront the issues that are facing them in their lives, make their lives better, both in terms of their economic prospects, but also their social outcomes, and through that persuade them not to go down these divisive routes. And I think the mistake that too many politicians make, and you saw the Democrats make this in the US, is they fixate on the personality, they fixate on being on the right side, for example, of a culture war, rather than confront the hard issues that pushes people to these reactionary politicians.
But a lot of these people go far right, like the racists, they don't understand Islam. For example, Farage doesn't understand it. He's probably never read the Quran. Both you and I are Muslim. And I know politics hasn't really anything to do with religion, but a lot of racist people follow Farage. What's your view about that, racism and politics?
So again, look, I've spoken a lot about racism and politics over a number of years, and we've got a huge challenge in terms of ingrained prejudice. That's not just Islamophobia, it's Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, sexism, homophobia, you know, all sorts of different forms of prejudice and hate, which is in all parts of society, which is in every institution. But fundamentally, I think the vast majority of people in this country are good, well-minded people who just want a better life for themselves and better outcomes for their family and better outcomes for their community. And the challenge we have right now is the reason why politicians who perpetuate the politics of the far right or perpetuate the politics that taps into racism are seeing success is because they're tapping into people's fears and their genuine concerns to push them in that divisive direction. And the way to stop people going there is not by talking about those personalities or presuming that everyone that's pushed in that direction is somehow a racist or comes from a negative background. It is because we haven't confronted the issues that are frustrating them. It's how do we confront those issues? How do we fix the housing crisis in our country? How do we make sure our communities feel safe? How do we make sure every young person gets opportunities in their life? How do you make sure people feel secure in their retirement. All of these things are the way we're going to get people back from divisive politics and actually get better outcomes for our country. And that's what I'm fundamentally focused on.
But that takes
I don't want to make the same mistakes the Democrats made.
But that takes time, brother, to get all those.
Totally.
Yeah, that's not going to happen overnight.
Oh no, totally takes time.
Yeah, you have to educate the people. You have to show them your policies and win their confidence over.
So confidence is a really important part to build that.
Yeah.
Because I think part of the strategy of opposition politicians, and I think there's a hint of this, to be honest, in Scotland with the SNP, the governing party, is so much of the tactics is if you make people feel as if everything is hopeless, nothing can get better, we can only do managed decline, then people are more likely to go down a reactionary route in terms of their politics and how they vote. So, for example, if you're so frustrated with the NHS and you never think things are going to get better, then you'll vote for a party that is what I call the FU vote, which is the vote for the most destructive option because you want to send a message rather than actually vote for an option that's actually going to improve your outcomes and make things better. And that's where I think people that are serious about doing politics in a grown-up way and people that are serious about governing our country, I would love to be First Minister of this country. I want to serve this country that has given me and my family so much. I think what we have to do is persuade people that there is hope, that things can and will get better, and that we know how to make them better, and we're going to demonstrate they get better, and we're going to take you with us. And if we take that approach, rather than fixate on the personalities, then I think we've got a chance to build that better future together.
I like that. That's a good policy, a good open-minded approach. You're looking at the group policy rather than the individual.
The reason why I'm going to emphasise, the reason why we have to do that is I think what's inadvertently happening is progressive politicians, left of centre politicians, are so fixated by what big, strong characters say that they're forgetting what they actually need to do. So the Democrats made that mistake in the US. I think there's a real risk that we make it here in the UK, that we get fixated by what is the latest crazy thing that someone said, or what's the latest crazy argument that someone made, and fixate on that, amplify the profile of that individual, and allow that individual to get the message across to even more people than otherwise they would have. Give them the oxygen they're craving, basically. How do we, instead of giving them the oxygen they crave, don't make it about the person? The future of our country is not about Nigel Farage. It's not about the Reform Party. It's about how we improve life opportunities and outcomes for people across the country. And fundamentally, only politicians that are serious about it can make it happen. People like Nigel Farage can't do that. And they don't want to do it. They want to tap into people's fears. I want to give people hope again. And through that more positive future, prove to them the government can work, prove to them that the institutions can change, and prove to them that they and their families have a positive future.
Nice. I wish you good luck with that. Another question I want to ask you, Anas, is I once went to a university, I spoke to the first year students about politics. And when I spoke to them...
You're a future politician, Nabil. There's a hint of a politician in there.
No.
I've seen when you do the interviews with Daniel Dubois, there's a desperate sportsman boxer in there.
I'm a jack of all trades.
Or when you're in with a businessman, there's the buzz of the businessman, and then when you're speaking to politicians, there's a buzz of a politician.
I like
so
it.
There's a wee hint of all of that in there.
I like to learn. I learn from each podcast. I'm learning from you now, brother.
No, that's very kind. That's very kind. I learn from people every day.
Thank you. So, that's the best education.
Absolutely.
So I spoke to some young adults. If someone's asking you, I want to come into politics, what would you say? For example, when I gave this lecture to young adults, this girl wanted to go into politics. Then she said, I don't want to go into politics anymore. And I said, why do you not want to go into politics? She goes, A, I don't believe politicians. B, the government don't care about us anymore, because if they did care, they wouldn't have given us the COVID vaccinations. C, if they did care, they would tax sugar really high. Sugar's a killer. Now, you're being from the medical background, you're a doctor. What do you think of that?
I better clarify, I'm a dentist. Doctors will get really upset. Doctors don't like to accept when dentists use the doctor title.
But still, you got the title.
Yeah, absolutely. But doctors don't like dentists using that title.
So what do you think of that? You should tax sugar, because sugar kills people. It's highly addictive. And then also vaccinations, we rushed into vaccinations. New research shows that the COVID vaccination, anti-vaxxers were better off. Before we were bullied to everyone that couldn't travel anywhere. You had to
So I think a couple of different things. One is, you're right, we've got to improve health inequalities around intake of sugar, better diets, etc. And I think there's already some of a mood change around a lot of that, particularly with younger people. I think younger people are now more aware of their health. That's why there's less of them smoking now. That's why you see in many demographics alcohol consumption coming down. I'm slightly worried though about vapes, if I'm honest. I think vapes is perhaps giving a bit of a spike.
Exactly.
In that. I can tell you by looking at your face there, I was thinking maybe you're a vapor.
No, I don't smoke, thank God. So
right,
one of the people, one of the
the guy behind the camera is a smoker. So don't blur this part. Don't blur this part of the podcast out. So I think there's more of an awareness of their own health, and so I think there's a combination of what's legislative, what's regulatory, and what's just actually good practice. And I think government's got to get the balance of that right, because if I think you go too much for legislation and regulation, you could inadvertently, I think, damage economic prospects and actually push people the wrong way. And on the vaccines, I think people forget how big a challenge COVID was, and how tense a time it was, where people were locked in their homes. Our NHS was largely overrun. Lots of vital treatments were being cancelled, and people weren't able to live their lives in a normal way. And in that circumstance, actually, the speed of the vaccine and the sharp fall in the number of deaths after the vaccine was significant and really, really important. So we got out of the cycle of lockdowns and the cycle of damage that COVID caused. But we have got a broader problem here. It actually relates to the earlier question you had about Farage, Musk, and strong personalities. Is the level of misinformation now is higher than it's ever been. The quality of public discourse is probably the poorest that it's ever been, despite our channels and our communication being more open than they've ever been. And that's where I think responsibility for social media giants, as well as positive and true information, is really important. Because you mentioned the young girl, I think you said who was interested in politics.
19-year-old.
Who was interested in politics but never thought politics was for her.
Yeah, because of the reasons she didn't have confidence.
So one part is by a breakdown in trust in institutions and a breakdown in trust in politicians. People think, why would I want to do that? Secondly, because you lose hope that actually politics can make things better. I fundamentally believe that the single best vehicle to improve lives for people in our country and to improve the world is actually still through politics. Every big thing that's happened in the world has had politics behind it. And take the single biggest, most positive social change we've had in our country here in the UK, the NHS. The NHS was created because a political decision was made to create an NHS. So politics is still fundamentally important. The problem you have, though, is the disconnect between the people and politics, and we've got to break that disconnect. That's partly about getting the right people, but it's also about making sure that you're creating opportunities for people from different diverse backgrounds to come into politics as well. And so my advice to every young person who's interested in politics is, first of all, decide what you believe. Of course, your beliefs and your views and your and different value systems can evolve over time and evolve through life, but fundamentally decide what you believe in terms of that political spectrum. Join a political party or join a political campaign, because what you'll learn from it, the networks you'll make from it, the energy and enthusiasm you'll get from it could be life-changing. Third is care about your local community, because so much of politics is local. So many candidates that get selected are because they're local candidates and that then go on to become national figures, but they started off as local figures. Is have that local connection and relationship. But fourth, don't stop believing. And if you don't do it because you think it's not for me, then loads of other people are not going to do it either. Step up, do it. And regardless of which political party it is, I'm not saying, I would love everyone to join the Scottish Labour Party in Scotland, but honestly, whatever you believe, pursue it, because we need that next generation to come into politics, and we need people from varied backgrounds. So how do we get business people, health people, people in legal, people from all social backgrounds into our politics, into our parliaments, into our civil service, into our decision making, Because unless you're in the corridors of power, unless you change the diversity of people making decisions, you aren't going to get the right decisions for the country.
Of course. The other thing that young lady said was that during the times of, let's say, your father, there's a lot more kudos in politics. Everybody wants to be a politician. Today's politician doesn't have as much kudos. And also...
You know, they used to say politics was show business for ugly people. I personally think I proved that wrong. But it's clearly not showbiz. It's clearly not showbiz if it ever was.
Yeah.
But you're right in the sense of there used to be, I think, a status and a thought around your elected member and your politician.
Like Margaret Thatcher's time, there's a lot of kudos.
And some of that, I mean, mentioning Margaret Thatcher in Scotland, you're not going to get kudos. That's
no, but
that's going to be negative. That's going to be negative.
I'm talking about England.
You know?
I'm talking about UK.
I think in certain parts of the country, different prime ministers and different politicians have a different kind of cut through and a different level of kind of respect and kudos at different times in our history.
Yes.
But now, I think it's clear that that link between the public and the politician is broken, and we've got to strengthen that again.
Of course. There's a loss of confidence because everything's available on TikTok, Instagram. People look at the tablets on the phone. Also,
but also people think things haven't got better.
Yeah.
I think that's fundamentally the challenge. Is if you think since the financial crash, we had the financial crash. Then we had one big divisive referendum in Scotland around independence, regardless of what side people took. Then we had the Brexit referendum, whatever side people took. Then the outcome of the Brexit referendum, the process of the Brexit referendum. Then we had the COVID crisis. It has felt as if our country, and indeed the world, has gone from crisis to crisis to crisis to crisis, with things gradually getting worse, and just having the managed decline of our country or people's communities. And in that space where things just feel like they're always getting worse and hope is taken away from people, that's where the politics of division takes hold. And that's fundamentally what our problem is we have got to break out that cycle of doom and break out the cycle of managed decline and prove to people that things can and will get better. And that, to be honest, that's why I'm doing this job. I could be still working in the NHS as a dentist. I could be working in business.
It'll be an easier life for you.
The reason why, I mean, probably, but the reason why I care is I honestly, and I still remember this to this day, is I remember when I got elected as a parliamentarian in 2010, and I remember giving a speech, not in the Parliament, but actually around the estate of the Parliament. I think it was back in 2011. I remember saying in a speech in 2011 that I felt as if we had a chance where my children would grow up in a world where people didn't see difference, and we only made positive progress. I actually don't feel that now. I honestly have a fear that my children are growing up, well, they are growing up in a more divided world and a less hopeful world as well. And what are we going to do? What's my generation going to do? We've got a choice. We can either choose to walk away and just let it decline, or we can try and choose to change the world and make it a better one that we hand to our next generation. Because for all our criticisms of our ancestors, I think generation to generation, I think they have always handed a better country and a better world to the next generation that followed. If
and a better life as well.
Totally. But I honestly think for families right across the country, they feel as if they're handing a weaker world and a poorer life to the next generation than the one they had. And we can't be the generation that breaks that positive cycle. We've got to be the one that turned that around. And that's what I'm absolutely determined to do. Scotland's given me everything. It's given my family everything. I'm proud that I was born and brought up in Scotland. I'm proud that my children are Scots. But I want to deliver a better, stronger, fairer Scotland for them than the one I was brought up in. And I want them to do the same for the generations that follow. I want Scotland to continue.
You want the cycle to continue.
Of course. And that's where I think there's a fundamental break, where that promise of you will leave the next generation better off than the last, I think that's broken now. People worry about their kids, they worry about their grandkids in a way they've never done before. And our generation's got a real responsibility to make sure we get that right.
Nice. Well, I wish you good luck. So let's say someone from Scotland, they have a choice to voting for your party, for you to become First Minister of the opposition. Why would someone vote for you? Because you're going to promise them everything. Why would they know that? How will they know you're going to deliver? This is for the listeners, because obviously you're a friend. I want you to be the First Minister. Then I can buy loads of property and get the money quickly. So,
you're going to get us both in trouble.
No, but obviously fair market price.
Of course.
Yeah, and So let's say my name's Mr. Jones and I have a choice to vote for you or the opposition party. Why would I choose you? What would you, this is for the listeners, because this will go to over 1 million people.
So fundamentally what I'll say, Nabil, is I'm not a kind of politician that's going to promise you the world or mislead you. I'm going to be straight up. There are certain things we can do, certain things we can do quickly, and certain things are going to take time. But fundamentally ask yourself this question. Do you feel as if Scotland is going in the wrong direction or the right direction? And I think if you look at what's happening in our hospitals, if you look at what's happening in our schools, if you look at what's happening in our high streets, if you look at what's happening in our communities, if you look at what's happening with businesses, I think unless you are fixated in a establishment bubble, you will feel as if everything is going in the wrong direction rather than the right direction. And the chance we have in May 2026 is to turn that around and take our country in a new direction where we reform and renew our NHS, where we close the opportunity gap, where we make sure everyone has a safe and secure home and a safe and secure community, and we support businesses to thrive so Scotland can be a positive advert to the rest of the UK and to the rest of the world. That's what you will get if we elect a Scottish Labour government, and that's what you'll get with me if I'm First Minister, someone that serves the people, not hoping the people serve the government, and puts Scotland on the map, being a deal maker, getting things done, and making sure that we're a more prosperous nation as a result.
Good. Well, I hope you get there. I think personally, as an entrepreneur, a lot of your success will depend what Starmer does in the next 18 months. In England, if he turns the economy around and makes it thriving again, boosts the economy, then you've got a better chance of winning. What do you think?
I think three things are fundamentally going to decide.
I think that's the most important thing.
I think it's one of the three things that's going to define the election in 2026. I think one, people making a judgment on whether they think the current Scottish government is doing a good job or not. That's going to be number one. Number two is going to be whether they think we are a credible alternative and what we would do differently. And third is if they believe a UK Labour government is delivering for them or not. And on all three of those, we have to win the argument.
Yeah, but if UK Labour government's delivering, that makes your job a lot easier.
Well, I think it's safe to say that if a UK Labour government is performing better, it is a positive for us rather than the opposite. I think that's true, but I think even despite all the, like, I'm a former dentist, I'm the first to accept in the early part of a Labour government we've had some teething problems. Right? I'm the first to accept that. But I think even despite those teething problems, the fundamentals in Scotland are the areas that are responsible for the Scottish government, we are not running them or managing them well in Scotland, and that's why we need a change in Scotland. But of course, I want a UK Labour government to deliver for every part of the country, including Scotland, but I also want a Scottish government that is delivering for the people of Scotland, and that's what I'm determined to deliver, and that's why I'll be campaigning flat out over the next 15 months to be First Minister of the nation I love.
And this podcast will be campaigning for you as well.
Fantastic. I'll look forward to it. I'll look forward to it. Thank you, Nabil.
And also, Anas, you're 42 years old. And in your 42 years, what have you got any regrets? For example, me, I'm older than you. If you could look at the future, you could possibly study politics and economics or something rather than the dentistry. Or do you think dentistry was a good choice to go down? So have you got any regrets or not?
To be honest, mate, I don't do regrets, whether they be political ones or professional ones, because everything. Everything. I'm just coming to that because everything is a lesson.
Yeah.
Like I always say that the two biggest and most difficult and probably negative things that happened in my professional life was the defeat in 2015 when I lost my seat in the election in 2015, or when I lost the first leadership election I fought in 2017. Those were the two hardest, most difficult, negative professional points in my life. But I honestly believe that they're still the two best things that ever happened to me. And the reason why is, one, they strip you of ambition.
Yes.
It liberates you of ambition, makes you a better human being, a better politician. Second, it grounds you in terms of what's real.
Yeah, makes you humble.
And makes you tougher.
Yeah.
And third, I think it gives you you're more comfortable in your skin, you can be yourself. And I think when I look back at some of the things that I looked like and sounded like in the early days of my political career, I'm like, my God, that was a child, but I was a very young person then. But I honestly think those two negatives in my life are the two best things that happened to me.
Those negatives turn into a positive.
Totally, because you learn more from your defeats than you do from your successes.
Yeah.
Totally learn more. But where you do have regrets is So I don't have regrets in terms of politics. I don't have regrets in terms of professional. Where, of course, you do have regrets is in terms of personal. Is like when I first became a member of Parliament, I missed out on loads of significant moments in my eldest son's life, largely living in London for 5 years. So I've got huge regrets with that. Of course, every child will have regrets around how much time they give their family, how much time they give their parents.
Yes.
All of that are the more things that I focus on around that personal stuff. And I'll tell you why I think about it a lot. Is I think about, so I've got a 16-year-old, I've got a 14-year-old, and I've got an 8-year-old. And so my eldest was 18 months when I became an MP. And so for 5 years I was in London a hell of a lot. And even when I was in Scotland, you were travelling, and the times you'd leave, they would still be in bed. The time you get back, they'd be in their bed. And then your weekends are crammed doing lots of constituency work or other political and commitments. And when I came to the Scottish Parliament in 2016 and I was spending more time in Scotland, I could see his confidence level go through the roof compared to where he was before. And the difference in terms of the time I spend with my youngest now in particular, that was time I never got with my eldest. And that for me is probably more the personal regret side. Is for all politics matters, of course it does, for all professional development matters, for your case business matters. Nothing matters more than investing time and energy in your children.
Yeah, and your family. I agree with that.
And your family, because that's your legacy. That's what life's really about. Politics is here, politicians are here, gone tomorrow. People forget about politics and they move on. But your children and your family are what matters most, and that's something I never forget.
Good to see a politician with family values.
Oh, look, it's my family's the centre of my universe. They bring me back down to earth in a minute, and they're everything. And I also get to relive my youth. So I'm watching football with my eldest, I'm playing pool with my middle one, and I'm back watching wrestling again with my youngest, which is fantastic.
What about cricket? Being Pakistani origin, it's rude not to watch cricket.
Honestly, so my kids were really into cricket pre-COVID. Actually, my elder two actually played for a local cricket club pre-COVID, and then COVID came and they lost interest and never went back to playing cricket. But I can't pretend I'm great at cricket. I'm probably the Shahid Afridi of cricket. And
boom, boom. He's been on the podcast.
Has he? Whereas, I'll be able to take 8 or 9 balls, I'll hit them really well, and then after that, I'm out. So
you've got a good strike rate. You've got a good strike rate.
I've got a good strike rate, but I don't want to be the Shahid Afridi of politics. I'd rather probably be more of a mainstay and
be a Joe Root.
Do a long innings.
Be a Joe Root.
So that's you as an England fan, right? Talking about Joe Root.
Scotland's got its own cricket team now as well.
Scotland has got its own cricket team, and Scotland's doing not bad actually as a cricket team.
They're qualifying the World Cup.
They've qualified the World Cup, and lots of great Scottish talent. But the more we can attract positive talent, the better across all the different professional sports.
So, Anas Sarwar, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
I know you're very busy, and it's great to see an Asian person, leader of the Labour Party in Scotland. I really do hope that you make us proud and become the First Minister of Scotland.
Thank you, Emil, and thank you for the invitation to come and chat to you on the podcast. And you don't often say this. You talk about your business interest, but actually you and your family have much more than a business interest. You have a deep community interest and care about causes. Both at home and right around the world. And the amount of amazing projects that you and your family do and don't talk about, I think says something fantastic about the character that you and your family have. So
thank you. I really appreciate that.
I wish you every success in the future.
Because I strongly believe that if you give in charity, God gives you more. That's what I believe. And sometimes when I give charity, God gives me amazing deals that I didn't even expect. So if you give to the universe gives you back tenfold.
Fantastic.
Thank you,
and that's the right approach.
Yeah.
That's the right approach.
Thank you. So when you're in power, give me the deals, and I'll give to charities. I'll give to charities in Scotland.
I will do.
Scotland.
I should emphasise that we will do what's fair and right. But of course, we want people to invest in Scotland. We want people to come and recognise how brilliant a country Scotland is and to invest in jobs and opportunities here. And you are one of many businesses that already do that.
We're doing a £100 million scheme in Glasgow.
We want to continue that investment. And Glasgow is particularly important. I mean, if we're honest, the economy of Glasgow has really stagnated, particularly since COVID. And the more direct investment we can attract into Glasgow, particularly into housing and also into retail, etc., and hospitality is going to be really, really important, particularly in our town centre.
Once I've got the planning of that Glasgow scheme, I'll drop you a message, and when the flats are developed, I'll give you a shout. And
that'd be great. I would love to come and see the project and persuade you to invest even more.
Anas, as you know, myself and my family in the property business, between myself and my brother, we've got like 70 years experience. We've done over £5 billion worth of transactions, over 5,000. And fundamentally, this podcast is Bricks to Riches. It's a property podcast. So if you're in power, what would you do for the housing sector of Scotland? How would you promote housing, affordable housing, luxury housing? What would you do for the housing sector? Because everybody needs a house to live in. It's like when there was a recession, housing market went through the roof because people need a roof over their heads. Yeah, like people need food to live, but like industrial or retail or commercial didn't go as flamboyant as the residential sector. So what would you do for that asset class, housing, if you're in power? How do you promote housing in Scotland?
Nabil, I'm so glad you asked the question because I think the perfect bridge of economic and social policy is housing. Because building more homes and the right kind of homes helps boost the economy, create more jobs, but it also improves social incomes for people. And one of the basic human rights that an individual has is around a safe, warm home. And the reality is right now in Scotland, we have declared, not just me and my party, but actually our parliament has declared a housing emergency because that's the scale of the challenge we've got right now. So right now in Scotland, we have the lowest levels of house building for decades. We've got the lowest level of social homes being built since the 1980s. We've got 10,000 children right now in Scotland living in temporary accommodation, homeless with no home to call their own. Thousands of them living in refuge centres, hostels and B&Bs, which is a complete disaster. And it's not just one part of the country that has a housing emergency. That housing emergency spreads in every corner of our country.
Yeah, it's all of the UK.
Urban, rural, island, and particularly here in Scotland, where our home building rates are actually lower than for example, in parts of England. So we've got to confront the housing emergency. So what's the solution? Number one, we've got to fix our planning system because the planning barriers mean that housing investment's going to other parts of the country and not coming here. Secondly, legislation has been a problem because by the legislation that was passed by our parliament in the last parliament, we actually saw investment in housing fall and the number of house builds fall as well because it's less attractive right now to get bank capital for a housing project in Scotland than it is for another part of the UK. We've got to fundamentally shift that in terms of attracting investment here. Third, we've got to build all types of new homes. So that is private rented sector, direct private sector, social sector, all have to build more homes if we are going to meet our ambitions around housing. We've got high levels of derelict homes, so homes that already exist but are lying empty because they require repair. We've got to invest in those and get those houses back on street.
And also the energy levels of those old homes.
Totally. And how we retrofit existing homes is also going to be really important to bring down people's bills so they can afford those homes as well as the mortgage of those homes. All of that absolutely intertwined. And that's why we want to confront the housing emergency by fixing planning, bringing our derelict homes on stream, making sure we're creating the investment environment for people to invest in more homes. And that includes government investment. I want us to use our Scottish National Investment Bank to do housing investments so we can build more homes here in Scotland and partner with business to loop in that investment in order to maximise more homes in Scotland.
Good. And me having so much experience, when you're in power, I don't mind being an advisor, consultant, free of charge to help the economy grow.
Well, I'm going to come to people who are experts in the fields to say to them, what are the barriers? How do we break them down? What are the lessons we can learn from other parts of the country and implement them here? And third, what are the big ideas and projects that you can make happen by the other relationships you have. That's going to be absolutely crucial if we were to confront the housing emergency.
Great. And one last advice I'd give you, because you spoke about the next generation. A lot of people can't afford to buy their own house. So you're 18, 21-year-old kid, you're working, you didn't go to university, 16, you've got a full-time job, you're on 30 grand a year, £30,000. So maybe the government can give people a 100% mortgage so that they can at least get on the ladder. It's better than
So again, a couple of things. One is we talk often about the dream of home ownership.
Yes.
But if we're honest about it, for lots of people, it is just that, a dream.
Yes.
At the current rates of incomes or the current rates in terms of trying to get a mortgage, many people will never be able to own their own home, which is not acceptable, which is not fair. So that is, yes, a mortgage support scheme, but it's also around public investment in terms of building more homes.
Yes.
It's about regulating the private rented market, not to push investment away, but actually to try and attract investment and supporting people into those new homes by building more homes in the right places with the right kind of affordability. All of that is going to be fundamentally crucial, and housing is going to be a key centrepiece of what we want to achieve in terms of our economic and social outcomes.
Good. Well, I wish you good luck with that, and I'm here to help you with that journey, because that's my
We'll be
expertise.
taking you up on that offer of help.
Doing the way teeth is your expertise, housing is my expertise. But thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I wish you all the best. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.